It's the Joe Show, starring Joe, doing all sorts of Joe things.
Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Yo, the Bolt fam, it's the director. Chargers fans, first things first, man. We got to check in with the Bolt fam. How we doing, guys? I know it's been a tough week. Emotions are high. The last game, something the Chargers are trying to put behind them as well as its fans. It's been a tough load to carry. I'm right there with you guys. I had to take some time to myself, try and step away for a moment to really sort out my thoughts on the whole situation. The bottom line for me was something's got to change. Things have to happen. Wheels got to get moving. We've got to move past this at some point. Well, step one to that did occur today. I know a lot of you on Twitter right now probably celebrating the news that the Chargers have officially moved on from Joe Lombardi, the offensive coordinator, who, let's be honest, I think a lot of us were hoping for moving on from Joe Lombardi a lot sooner than this. I was one of those guys saying, hey, I'm not completely opposed to maybe moving on around the middle of the season. Of course, it's very complicated. You're kind of rolling the dice when it comes to something like that, bringing in a new guy halfway through the year. But still, how much worse could it have gotten? Either way, the Chargers taking an important step in improving for their 2023 season. We got a little bit to talk about today in terms of Joe's downfall, maybe some light touching of some potential replacements at offensive coordinator, but I think most importantly, what more can the Chargers do in terms of personnel, coaching staff, front office, et cetera, to really move the needle in the right direction? Because honestly, we got valuable years of Justin Herbert burning away right now. We've got to take advantage of it while we have him right now. So let's get into it, guys. Before we do, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Now, we know the Chargers season is over, but we still have a few more weeks of playoff football to get in on the action with. Trust me, guys, when you're down in the dumps like this, I don't know how many people really want to watch football anymore, but I will be watching. It's something that I still do enjoy in the playoffs. This is definitely a way to make things a little bit more palatable, knowing your team's not going to be making it any further. But still, it's a good time. Use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $100 and get in on the action. Finally, before we kick off, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. Small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action. The Chargers have fired offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi as well. This one was a bit of a shock to me. Shane Day, the quarterbacks coach slash passing game coordinator, I do believe. So let's jump right into this, guys. Talk a little bit about the Chargers moving things around this early. I think a lot of us were expecting something to happen within the first couple of days. Well, there it is, Bolt fam. There's movement out there. The Chargers, again, starting to maybe kick things off and improving their 2023 season. And in my opinion, there's a lot of improving to do as of right now because, again, the name of the game is to use Justin Herbert to your full advantage and make sure he's being utilized correctly while his valuable time with the Chargers is here. And again, I know we're still talking like director. We have him for what? Another 10, 15 years. Understood, but at the same time, that's 10, 15 years of very, very valuable quarterback play. Not a lot of franchises can say the same thing. So let's start things off with the Joe Lombardi, the canceling of the Joe Show for Joe Lombardi. Joe's downfall. Why did we move on from Joe Lombardi? Well, if you're not a Chargers fan, or if you haven't been watching the entire seasons, or heck, maybe you didn't even watch the last week's playoff game in our collapse versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, you wouldn't know that Joe Lombardi and this offense is probably one of the most painful things to watch if you're a Chargers fan. Oh my goodness. When you've got a team featuring Justin Herbert, you got all of these weapons in Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen. A few of those guys weren't available all season, maybe a couple of them, very little of the season. The point of the matter is, you've got Justin Herbert at quarterback. And I think the biggest grievance I've had against Joe Lombardi this season is a lack of getting Justin Herbert free. In terms of, we got to let this man cut loose, dude. Justin Herbert's going to be one of those talents that people talk about for a long time in terms of him being special, breaking how many records in the NFL so far. One of the best, if not the best quarterback in his first 3 years in the NFL. We've got to make sure that he's being utilized correctly. And right now, at least I should say a couple of days ago, it felt like Joe Lombardi was out there, driving the Ferrari of Justin Herbert, but at like 10, 15 miles an hour. Why not use that weapon to its full potential? Outside of that, I think a lot of people can really identify some of the weaknesses that we had in terms of our offense. Predictability was probably one of the biggest ones I had issue with. The Chargers just really felt, I don't know, the first half always felt pretty fresh, right? There was a slew of games where the first quarter really took some time to get things going. But in terms of adjustments, in terms of, experienced and veteran, defensive coordinators, they really figured out the Chargers by halftime. And if there was one thing that we didn't really see at halftime as a Chargers fan, it was halftime adjustments, man. It felt like everything kind of remained the same. There wasn't really much in terms of, innovativeness or finding, creativity to keep things fresh, keep things moving, keep things shifty, to continue that momentum on offense. It was just sort of the same thing. And that honestly felt like it was really easy for defensive coordinators to figure out and then just start kind of picking apart. Any lack of run game, too, is going to hurt you. And the Chargers certainly have not been a strong running team, I would say, for a couple of years now. Not to the fault of our personnel. I think, Austin Eckler is one of the best running backs in the NFL. And I do think Joe did an okay job at trying to utilize that talent to its strengths. But in the end, a lack of a run game is going to hurt you. What it feels like Joe Lombardi was trying to do in lieu of that, trying to supplement a lack of a run game, was trying to mimic what the Patriots had been doing for a couple of years in their time with, James White and those running backs that weren't especially impressive on the ground, but certainly could put up yards through the air. And that's probably one of the reasons why the Chargers brought him in. Joe Lombardi, of course, formerly of the New Orleans Saints, had a bit of an exposure to Alvin Kamara and that scheme in New Orleans. And that's honestly something that was thriving at the time. Maybe not so much anymore, but back then it was a high commodity. And right now the Chargers have one of the, if not the best pass receiving back in the league. Maybe not a bad idea to use that to your advantage. But ultimately, too much of a good thing might end up being a bit of a bad thing in the Chargers. Maybe not even that. Maybe it was just a lack of creativity and how we utilize these plays. And maybe even when, too. The timing always seemed extremely strange to me. You guys remember that jet sweep that we saw last week versus the Jags? 3rd and 1. You got a 6'6" quarterback that can sneak the ball. It's these very simple things that always elude me. Like, why didn't we go with the easy thing? Why did we decide to go with the complicated, screen or jet sweep or something like that instead of the yards that are kind of in front of you? And these are the decisions that ultimately stacked up to the decision where I feel like Joe Lombardi needed to be moved on from. Now, one important aspect I also wanted to highlight is something that one of our mods in the live stream constantly points out, and it's something I'm not hearing a lot from other sources. So shout out to Tara the mod. She's always bringing up this point, and it's a very, very good point to be heard. Lack of sufficient quarterback protection. Now, you might say, director, that's on the offensive line. We can't blame the OC for that. Well, there's a lot of instances where you kind of can. And in terms of the Chargers, when you're looking at specific situations, let's say a right tackle, Trey Pipkins, goes down, which we saw a few times this season, you're going to want to give him some help on that side. Foster Sorrell, sometimes even Storm Norton, whoever was picking up that side, you're going to want to throw in a little bit of extra help out there. And we saw very little of that. When I mean extra help, I mean maybe, shifting the line to that direction a little bit more. Maybe adding a running back in there to chip the pass rush a bit. It feels like we saw very little effort in terms of finding a way to massage those errors. Instead, it felt like, well, we got Justin Herbert out there. We're going to have to find a way, or he's going to have to find a way to survive these games despite not having a right, sometimes left tackle. And that, in the end, really did hurt. There's also way more things that you can do in terms of maybe we don't have the best pass protection from this direction. Let's say, Jamari Sawyer's doing pretty great. You got Corey Linsley doing pretty great. Maybe at times Matt Fowler doing pretty great on the left side. The right side being suspicious, or in this case, a little bit weak. Maybe you run a little bit more play action. Maybe you run a little bit more boot. Get your quarterback moving outside of the pocket. These are things that the timing just never felt right. Sometimes maybe it was utilized, but a lot of the times it felt inappropriate. And maybe when it was executed, it was pretty vanilla to the point it was easy to shut down. I don't know, man. Second half efforts have been extremely conservative. It could be causing a regression in Justin Herbert. There's a lot of things leading up to the firing of Joe Lombardi. And at this point, I feel like it's something that should improve the Chargers going forward and leaving behind this predictable, maybe, unexciting, uninspiring offense, especially when you got a quarterback like Justin Herbert. You do not want to waste that talent. So the Joe Show's officially been canceled, and I think we can start moving on as a Bull fam, trying to get our excitement back in terms of the offense going forward. Now, one thing that did kind of shock me today was also the news of the firing of Shane Day. This segment is called Shane Day Why, right? Why Shane Day? I don't know, man. This one kind of did throw me off guard a little bit. I thought he was doing a pretty good job in terms of quarterbacks coach. I know a lot of us miss Pep Hamilton a little bit, who moved on to the Texans. But it seemed like Justin Herbert and Shane Day had a great relationship. I felt like things were doing okay. But this may also have to do with something of him being a pass game coordinator as well, which, we'll be honest, at times looked okay, but for the most part does need a little bit of extra work too. And maybe you could attribute a little bit of this decision as to, well, Justin Herbert, he needs a bit more consistent movement in the right direction. And this season, I'm not quite sure how much we saw of that. Of course, he was incredible. I think very little of what happened this year falls on Justin Herbert. But of course, we didn't see the same sort of growth that we saw with Pep Hamilton. So I don't know. Maybe these are some of the reasons why we moved on from Shane Day as well. The entire offense is maybe looking to swing a shift this season, and I don't think that's a bad thing. So the Chargers, maybe in an effort to really revamp this offense, is kind of cleaning house in terms of the staff that's kind of in charge of that sort of stuff. And Shane Day maybe got kind of caught in the crossfire, but I didn't hate Shane Day. Maybe in the background he wasn't performing as desired for the Chargers, but that's just one thing to kind of point out. Now, a big segment of this video is going to be called who do we hire now, right? And this is more of a preview, okay? I do feel like I want to make a video later kind of dedicated to this topic once I've had time to really sit down and kind of go over some of the candidates. Of course, we're a little bit busy with this week. The wife's picking up the in-laws from the airport as we're talking right now, but it's something that we'll make some time for. Now, I'm not that well versed on all of the candidates yet, but here's some preview of like my surface level thoughts on the matter. We do have some guys in mind that I at least think should be considered, starting with Cliff Kingsbury right here, formerly of the Arizona Cardinals. I don't know, man. Again, it's really tough to take, a guy like, Kingsbury, head coach. He had a lot of things going for him. This season was a collapse, and of course, I think the Cardinals were wise to move on from him. But he might be a good fit in terms of offensive coordinator, right? I think the Chargers are looking for a specific kind of style, right? One that really puts Justin Herbert in the middle of everything. Justin Herbert needs to be the front man of this entire offense, the identity of this offense. That's one thing that the Chargers never really figured out this season, was an identity. What are we, right? We're at this point, like after the season, after the fact, I can tell you that we were the screen team, and that's not gonna move the needle, right? That's not going to instill fear into any team in the NFL. Of course, screens at some point are pretty effective, but this many, in these specific situations, predictable and easy to blow up. A guy like Cliff Kingsbury, the reason that his name comes to mind for me is, again, his style of offense, air raid style of offense, right? That could flow well with a guy like Justin Herbert. Not to mention, this sort of offense does favor a running back like Austin Eckler, so we don't have to completely abandon the good things that we saw from the Lombardi scheme. We could just maybe use them a little bit more intelligently, okay? And one thing I did like about Kingsbury is that it feels like he does understand his players' skill sets. You saw a lot of that with, Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins. There are things really designed around what they could do. At some points, the Arizona Cardinals offensive line, not looking too great. It's not as bad as other teams in the NFL, but certainly not good. You would see a lot of rollouts, boot actions. You got a fast quarterback, they're going to use him. Now, Justin Herbert's no Kyler Murray in terms of, speed or anything like that, but he has that ability, and that's something that I feel like a system like an air raid, a coordinator like Cliff Kingsbury would put to good use. But one big thing that I do like about Kingsbury is that he's very unafraid of aggressive passing plays, right? Empty backfield's pretty much a norm for this guy. And this does tell me that he identifies the talent that they've got in terms of those wide receivers and in the quarterback. He's also very aggressive in terms of making sure his quarterback's got weapons. Of course, we saw players go down. They go and trade for Marquise Brown. They're looking for speed. They're looking for all the right things to complement their quarterback out there. And these are all things that really add up to, I think that would be a nice fit. Is it the number one candidate for me? I couldn't tell you yet. I'm going to guess no, but at the same time, it's one of those names that did stand out. Maybe a light preview. We also got guys like Mike LaFleur, formerly of the Jets, Frank Reich, formerly of the Colts. These guys are innovators, in my opinion. And that's something that the Chargers desperately need to find this season. They got to find guys that are willing to adjust. And guys, certainly like Frank Reich, these guys are definitely great at adjusting on the fly, right? Frank Reich, how many different quarterbacks, how many different systems? He was able to find things that work. Maybe not head coach material. He, I think, is having interviews this week, one with the Panthers, if I'm not being mistaken here. But if he doesn't land a head coaching job, I think that's a guy that we have to consider bringing in. Formerly Charger, he was OC back in the San Diego days, right? He looks a lot better now, and that's a guy that's definitely on my radar. Mike LaFleur, definitely can say a lot about him as well. My point here being is that these guys, they don't stay in the same place too long in terms of predictability. They're very unpredictable, and they're very good at identifying their environment and building a system around that. These are really things that we need. Joe Lombardi, I think he tried doing that, specifically revolving around Austin Eckler more than anything, which definitely not a bad thing, but you really need to flip that a little bit. You need a system that's built around Justin Herbert that includes a strong system for Austin Eckler. This just didn't feel like it was built for Justin Herbert the most efficient way possible, okay? So for now, I'll leave it at that. Maybe a video dedicated to that later on this week, but that's kind of our preview there. Now, finally, probably one of the bigger, segments of this video, other coach firings. This is something a lot of Chargers fans have been asking me about. Director, are we moving on from Brandon Staley? Director, are we moving on, let's say, from the front office, Tom Telesco? I think he's certainly on the hot seat a little bit here too. A lot of Chargers fans wondering about that, but I think the most questions I'm getting is about Brandon Staley. And I think this has something to do with me also getting blasted on Twitter with questions about Sean Payton. Of course, you guys know early, very, very, very early, I was pretty much leading the Sean Payton train. Maybe I was doing that too early, okay? The Chargers had a great shot at going deep into the postseason. Maybe a bit of a distraction for the Bull fam. Maybe the timing was off, but honestly, in the end, maybe I wasn't completely wrong. Now, first off, before we get off on a tangent there, my stance on Staley. A lot of people are saying, Director, do you want Brandon Staley fired? Should Tom Telesco be fired? Should heads start rolling because of what we saw last weekend? Maybe. Here's my official stance on it. It's kind of a simple one, okay, about what I want the Chargers to be doing next season. My stance is I wouldn't be super upset if we kept Staley. I think there's some things in terms of timing and potential that we could still maybe itch into. But I would also be extremely excited if we signed Coach Payton. So there, very simple. I wouldn't be upset if we kept Staley, but I would be very excited if we got Sean Payton. And I think that's kind of where I want to keep it for now until I've had more time to really sort out my thoughts, because there's a lot of emotion right now. I'm still upset. I'm still very upset about last weekend. Yes, my wife, I was sulking around the house, 2-3 days in a row, just trying to find ways to kill time and come to terms with what happened. Very upset. And I would like to clear some of that out before really going down and saying I want Brandon Staley fired. I'm all in on Sean Payton. As of right now, I'll just say if we keep Staley, that's fine. If we go get Sean Payton, I would be excited. All right? So what do I think's going to happen? I think my guess at this point is kind of as good as yours, right? The Chargers, they don't really leak information out there about this sort of stuff. Things just kind of hit us out of nowhere. You guys remember the Khalil Mack trade last season? Okay, I will say, maybe I was one of the only YouTubers that kind of tuned in on that. Maybe a bit of a lucky guess, but most everybody, myself included, shocked when we saw that news, okay? All we can do right now is kind of speculate, because I don't think the Chargers are going to give us nothing. So for now, if I were to tell you guys what I'm hearing out there, what I'm looking about in the social media universe, it seems that the Chargers may be sticking with Staley going into 2023. I know that's not news a lot of you are going to want to hear, but again, it's not the worst news. I know it could be better in terms of moving on from last week's situation, but we have to take a look at the big picture here, okay? The players, they do adore this man, and that does speak for something, right? Maybe they feel some accountability there. Maybe they don't want to feel like their performance is in part a reason why we have to move on from Brandon Staley. But he has done some good things out there. I think Brandon Staley, again, he started to move the needle right in the right direction in terms of the defense really starting to improve. But if he's done anything right this season, it's instilling a fantastic culture. I do like the culture that Brandon Staley has brought in. It looks awesome. I do know that's probably something that the players are trying to protect. That's probably something the players care very much deeply about. And they don't want to see things, start over from square one. It's really difficult when you move systems, when you move schemes on defense. That's a very tough task to accomplish in the NFL. If you guys remember, a few years ago, we moved away from 4-3 to 3-4. That took a lot of, let's say, massaging, a bit of trial and error period. Now we kind of saw that again with the Brandon Staley system, maybe a bit weaker last season, really picked up steam at the end of this season. There's potential there for something special to develop in 2023 defensively for sure. I will have to point out, though, that the Chargers do run in the Vic Fangio system, and the Sean Payton, let's say that package, that bundled deal, might include the actual Vic Fangio as defensive coordinator. I'll just kind of throw that out there while we're kind of going over this topic. Now, the Chargers, they have a history of doing stuff like this in terms of keeping coaches even under a lot of scrutiny. We saw Anthony Lynn recently maintain his job for 4 seasons before finally getting removed. You guys remember, Anthony Lynn, very aggressive in terms of trying to get the run game going. Not a bad idea, but again, he did it to a fault. A lot of stubbornness there. And we're kind of seeing the same thing with Brandon Staley. He's doing a lot of things to a fault. Very stubborn. And then sometimes you see, decisions that the consistency isn't there in terms of, fourth down decisions, what they're doing on offense, some of the things that they're trying to do on defense. Consistency and stubbornness, kind of weird two things to go hand in hand in, but kind of, things that, the Brandon Staley's been sort of known for lately. And the Chargers, they seem to be very patient because we saw that same kind of stubbornness with Anthony Lynn maintain a job for 4 seasons. Now, this isn't to say that Staley can't, improve. Maybe he does, figure out a way, because he's a young coach, right? Maybe he does figure out a way to become less stubborn, become more innovative, to become more, consistent in terms of things that are working, things that are not. I think he can, right? I think there is definitely a possibility that he can improve next season and definitely, again, give us a solid chance at the postseason once again, and this time with better results. But between the epic playoff collapse, as well as the looming prospect of adding Coach Payton, there are a lot of fans that are ready to move on, okay? So if you guys are asking for my official guess, my guess, what the Chargers do with Brandon Staley is that they keep him another season, okay? And they're going to want to see how it goes. But this doesn't mean there isn't talk about Sean Payton going on in the background. Oh, you bet your butt there is. For those of you who don't know, I'm pretty sure that Tom Telesco and Sean Payton are very close friends. Maybe not close, but they're definitely friends, right? They're people that get along. And I'm sure that Tom Telesco's out there talking to the Spanoses and everybody just about, the prospect of bringing Sean Payton. And because I think the Chargers, and again, some people may not agree with this, but I think the Chargers and Coach Payton are great fits. Maybe perfect fits. But I'm just not sure how willing the Chargers are to make that move right now, right? The Bolts are going to have to send away valuable draft capital in order to make that happen. Now, what's funny is if you guys are looking at social media yesterday, Coach Payton leaked that would take, a mid to late first round pick in order to acquire him from the Saints. Don't know if that's something you're going to want to be leaking out there, Coach. I'm not sure how happy the Saints front office is with that information being leaked out into the universe. Kind of suspicious that he would do that. I think he's still gunning for that Chargers job, right? With that statement, he did kind of, kick to the nuts in terms of his value for trade compensation for the Saints. Kind of feels like he was doing that to get his hands on a team like the Chargers. Maybe he's going after Arizona. There's talk about him to the Texans. No. But he also stated that he would be willing to wait for the right coaching opportunity. Okay. And that, again, kind of, Points to the Chargers if Brandon Staley doesn't work out, which I think this is not Staley's last year, but, it would certainly take the asking price down in terms of compensation for the Saints, right? Next season, he won't be worth the first. He'd only have 1 year left on his contract. It's certainly something that the Chargers might feel is a little bit better of an option to wait until next season. See if Coach, Staley can really pick things up. If he does, we can stick with Staley. If not, there's that option of Coach Payton. My personal opinion, would the director be willing to part with a first rounder for that coach? Yeah, I would. I'm sorry, guys. I definitely would. But at the same time, the timing may not be right. So that's just something to kind of monitor. So the last thing I did want to close this video out with is that we cannot waste any more of Herbert's talent on this team. Okay, whatever the Chargers do, it's got to be with the objective of aggressively protecting Herbert's potential going forward, his time with this team, because not very many teams get this lucky in terms of quarterback. Okay, and the Chargers have made their first step in making something like that happen. Joe Lombardi out. We'll see who they bring in. Maybe there's discussions of other movements as far as, staff going on in the background. Could be Coach Staley, could be Tom Telesco. You never know. My guess is that those two stay this season. We see how it goes. Maybe Coach Payton waits for us next year. There's a lot of options out there. If it were me, it's so tough to say. I honestly think I would go after Coach Payton. I know some people really don't like hearing that. It's not because I don't support Brandon Staley. I think Staley, I might be a little bit more lenient than a lot of Chargers fans because I do think there's a lot of things I like that he brought here. I think that he's very smart. I think he's young. He has room to improve. I'd like to give him time to improve and really prove what he's got. But sometimes when opportunity comes knocking, like a future Hall of Fame head coach, a guy that can really give the Chargers their best opportunity at a Super Bowl run instantly. We saw the result of that with Coach Doug Peterson and the Jags. This man transformed that team in one season. You guys are crazy to think that Coach Payton wouldn't do the same thing. That's the opportunity that I can't let pass me by. Doesn't mean I'm not supporting Brandon Staley. No. I mean, yes, because, I want to take advantage of the opportunity, but it doesn't mean I don't believe in Brandon Staley in some way, shape, or form. I'm very disappointed with what happened last week, but I can't just sweep under the rug all the other things I liked about him this year, and I do believe there's room that he can improve, and I do think he has the ability to improve. But if it were me making the decisions, if it were me, planning out the future for the Bolts, I don't think I hesitate. I think I go after Coach Payton. But again, there's a lot of ins and outs here. The timing may not be right. We have to wait and see. I'm all about aggressively protecting Justin Herbert's talent going forward. But you guys let me know in the comment section below what you think. Again, it's the off season. We'll have a lot more time to talk about these topics, a lot more time for me to sit and think and really, gather my thoughts in terms of coaching, in terms of, again, the draft is coming up. We're getting started with the research on that. We got time. And we'll have more videos coming out to talk about this topic. And certainly, I think we're going to start with the offensive coordinator and then move on to the coaching situation. So anyway, you guys let me know your comments in the comment section below. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. The Joe Show has been officially canceled.